Welcome back to the deep dive. And if you have been with us for this whole season, well, this is kind of it. Episode 100.
It really is something, isn't it? A milestone.
Definitely. And if our journey together this season has felt a bit like a university course, digging into how humans tick, well, think of today as your commencement ceremony.
That's a great way to put it. It feels like a culmination. We've spent months really taking apart the blueprints of the mind, haven't we? Looking at everything from why we buy certain things to why our bodies just freeze sometimes under stress.
All those pieces.
Yeah.
The raw materials, the knowledge. It feels like they're all finally on the table now, fully assembled.
Mm-hmm.
And so the mission today, it isn't just another recall test, not another quiz on telling cognitive dissonance from confirmation bias.
No, definitely not.
The mission now is integration.
Yeah.
It's about you taking that huge toolkit you've gathered, all the neuroscience bits, the behavioral economics, attachment theory, everything, and synthesizing it, making it your own.
Exactly. The whole point is for you to shift decisively from being a student of how change works to becoming the ultimate self-directed expert on yourself.
Because you're the one living your life day in, day out.
Precisely. And we're drawing on some giants here today, the architects of these fields. We've got Festinger on choice, Porges on your nervous system, James Clear on habits and systems, Jung on that deeper inner life.
It's not just theory anymore, is it?
Not at all. This is meant to be like the practical handbook for you to become the master architect, designing and, importantly, executing the life you actually want to lead.
Okay, let's unpack this ultimate lesson then. How to lead your own life with real intention and, dare I say, expertise.
Let's do it.
And it seems logical to start with the internal stuff, decoding that inner architecture, what's going on under the hood.
Right. And when we talk about inner architecture, the first thing to grasp, I think, is that the system you've inherited, your brain, your nervous system, it's a brilliant machine in many ways.
Optimized for survival.
Optimized for survival, absolutely, and for efficiency, but not necessarily optimized for objective truth or perfect rationality all the time. And that optimization, it leads to predictable errors, cognitive traps.
Okay, hashtag tag 1.1, the cognitive traps in decision mechanics. So let's start with one that really shapes how we justify our lives. Cognitive dissonance. Leon Festinger's work. It shows us something fascinating happens the moment we commit to a choice. Doesn't matter if it's a big choice like a job or a partner or something small like which coffee machine to buy. As soon as you choose, this tension kicks in.
Yeah.
Post-decision dissonance.
Right. That tension is that uncomfortable feeling, isn't it? That nagging thought, maybe the other option, the one I didn't choose, was actually better.
Yeah, exactly that.
And the sources are clear on this.
Right.
To get rid of that internal stress, that discomfort, we basically start doing mental gymnastics. We engage in self-persuasion.
So we don't actually reevaluate objectively.
Not usually, no. Instead, we start selectively filtering reality. We actively seek out information that confirms the decision we already made. We make our chosen path look shinier, objectively better, and the paths we didn't take. Suddenly, they look full of flaws we didn't notice before.
It's like the brain just goes, look, I already spent the energy making the call, so I must be right. And then it builds this little reality tunnel to back that up.
That's a perfect description. It builds the tunnel.
And this feeds right into that whole idea of behavioral predictability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Folks like Dan Ariely have shown this. If we're constantly kind of lying to ourselves just to feel better about our choices, how can we ever expect to be truly rational?
Well, the crucial finding from Ariely and others is that these irrational behaviors, they aren't just random glitches in the system. They're systematic. They follow patterns. And because they're patterned, they are remarkably predictable.
So the takeaway for you, the listener, trying to become the self-expert,
is you have to move beyond what they call naive psychology. That's the belief that you somehow uniquely always operate like a purely rational agent making optimal choices. We just don't. We all fall into these predictable patterns of irrationality.
Recognizing that these patterns exist for everyone, including yourself, that's the critical first step, isn't it, towards building some guardrails?
Absolutely. It lets you anticipate the traps.
And one of the sneakiest ways this shows up is selection bias.
Yeah.
The sources talk about this. It's like you quickly set a default story in your mind, right?
Yeah.
A narrative.
And that narrative then acts like a filter. It actively screens out or prevents you from even looking for evidence that might contradict it.
So what are the signs? How do you know if you're caught in selection bias?
Well, there are signals from the system, definitely. Things like feeling quick certainty about something complex, or immediately getting defensive if someone challenges that certainty.
Okay.
And maybe only recalling past experiences that conveniently support your current point of view while forgetting the ones that don't. That's a big one.
Right. This is where the self-expert needs to deploy some practical countermeasures, like mental tools.
Yes. And the sources give us two really good ones, almost like field drills you can run on yourself.
What's the first one?
The first is a direct challenge to your own mental model. You have to actively force yourself to ask, okay, let's assume for a minute I am definitively wrong here. What objective facts or what different perspectives would I be missing?
Ooh, that's tough.
It is. And the second part of that question is just as crucial. Who disagrees with me on this exact point, and what is the actual logic behind their argument? Not just dismissing them, but understanding their why.
That forces your system out of that comfortable confirmation loop, doesn't it? Makes you consider the complexity.
Exactly. It breaks the tunnel vision.
And the second countermeasure?
The second one is more structural, it's preventative, it's about pre-commitment. So, when you're facing a really complex decision, thinking about a new investment, maybe a big job offer, or even moving cities, the trick is, write down your measurable criteria for what success looks like before you even let yourself look at the specific options.
So you decide what good means first.
Precisely. If you pre-commit to needing, say, criteria A, B, and C met, you short-circuit the emotional bias that would inevitably kick in once you see an option that's maybe flashy or attractive, but doesn't actually meet your core needs.
You prevent the dissonance before the choice is even on the table.
You got it. It's proactive defense against your own predictable biases. Hashtag tag 1.2, the mind-body dialogue and conditioning.
Okay, so we have these cognitive traps shaping our decisions. The next layer in understanding our architecture is looking at the biological controls. And historically, this got into some major philosophical debates, didn't it? Particularly around B.F. Skinner and his idea of the autonomous man.
Oh, absolutely. Skinner really threw down the gauntlet. He argued that the traditional sort of romantic view of the autonomous man, this idea of an internal, almost magical center inside us from which all our uncaused behavior just springs forth.
Like a little CEO in the head?
Kind of, yeah. Skinner argued that this concept diminishes, it becomes less necessary as our scientific understanding grows. As we recognize more and more the powerful role of the environment, our learning history, the context, the conditioning, as we see how these things shape our actions.
The need for a magical inner will to explain behavior just sort of shrinks.
Exactly. His point was that our actions are profoundly influenced by the conditions our species evolved under and the specific conditions we personally live and have lived under. The autonomous man becomes less of an explanation and more of a placeholder for what we don't yet understand scientifically.
So let's move from that philosophical argument about free will to the more quantifiable control systems. Starting with something seemingly simple, but actually quite profound, Pavlovian conditioning.
Right. And we usually think of Pavlov as just, the dog, the bell, the salivation, simple association.
Yeah.
But the sources dig into some really interesting nuances, like inhibitory conditioning. This tells us a lot about how the mind can actually shut down incoming information.
How does that work?
Well, one key finding is that if you apply a really strong unconditioned stimulus, something naturally powerful like a mild shock or a very loud noise before you introduce the neutral stimulus you want to condition, like the bell, that strong preceding stimulus can intensely inhibit the development of the new conditioned reflex to the bell. Pavlov himself noted this effect was similar to someone who is deeply preoccupied.
Preoccupied, how so?
They become functionally deaf and blind to other things happening around them because they are so utterly immersed in the powerful internal state triggered by that first strong stimulus. Their system is basically flooded.
Wow, so that's like a physical illustration of what happens when we're maybe really stressed or experiencing trauma. The strength of the internal alarm signal literally blocks our ability to take in and learn from new, potentially helpful external information.
Precisely. The system is overwhelmed and goes into a protective but non-learning state.
That makes so much sense.
And that leads us directly to the ultimate regulator of our internal state, the big boss. The polyvagal theory, developed by Dr. Stephen Porges. This is absolutely essential knowledge for the self-expert because it fundamentally reframes how we think about stress, safety, and connection.
We're moving beyond just the simple fight or flight switch then.
Way beyond. If the old model was like a simple on-off switch for danger, the polyvagal theory reveals the sophisticated, layered hierarchy. Think of it like an operating system for managing safety and threat.
Okay, so it's layered, like different circuits.
Exactly.
Oh.
Our autonomic nervous system has evolutionary layers. The newest system, evolutionarily speaking, found in mammals, involves the myelinated vagus nerve. It's often called the social engagement system.
The myelinated vagus.
Right, and this system acts like an active vagal brake on the heart. When we feel safe, connected, socially engaged, this system is on and functioning well. It has high tone. This allows us to rapidly shift between being mobilized for activity and calming down for rest or connection.
So high tone in this system is good.
Very beneficial, yes. It supports social connection, reading facial expressions, understanding voice tone, even making our own facial expressions and vocalizations that signal safety to others. It tells our internal organs, hey, it's safe now, you can relax, digest, repair.
Okay, so that's the sophisticated, finely tuned ventral vagal system associated with connection, growth, safety. What about the older systems?
Well, beneath that is the sympathetic nervous system, the classic fight-or-flight mobilizer. And then the oldest layer, which we share with reptiles, is the unmyelinated dorsal vagal complex.
Dorsal vagal.
Its primary function is basic visceral regulation, gut function, etc. But when the newer systems are overwhelmed by extreme threat, this ancient system takes over and triggers the immobility response. The freeze or feigning death state. It's a massive physiological shutdown, a collapse.
And in mammals, getting stuck there is bad news.
Very detrimental if it becomes chronic. It hinders healing, digestion, social connection, basically shuts down growth and restoration processes. It's a last resort survival mechanism.
So the core function the whole vagal system is managing.
Yeah.
It's like a critical trade-off then between internal needs and external demands.
That's the absolute key takeaway, the synthesis point. When your environment or your perception of it signals safety, the system prioritizes internal needs, growth, restoration, social bonds, repair.
Okay.
But when the environment signals danger, the system actively downregulates all those restorative processes to free up energy, to support metabolic output for defense, fight, flight, or ultimately freeze.
So the self-expert realizes that managing their environment, yes, but also their perception of safety is fundamental. That's how you unlock the resources for growth and restoration, not just by constantly bracing for threats.
Exactly right. Perception is key.
Okay, we've covered the predictable cognitive traps, the biological controls like the vagal system. Now we need to add another layer of complexity onto this internal architecture, the psychological self. It's definitely not just one single thing, is it?
Not at all. And Richard Schwartz's Internal Family Systems Model, or IFS, gives us a really useful way to think about this. It views the psyche, the self, as naturally composed of different parts.
Parts like the inner critic, the procrastinator.
Exactly. Those are common ones. Protectors, firefighters, exiles. IFS has names for different typical roles and parts play. But the truly brilliant insight of the IFS model, I think, is the concept that underneath all these parts, however extreme or troubled they might seem, there's an undamaged core self.
The self with a capital S.
Yes. And this self is characterized by inherent positive qualities. Schwartz often talks about the 8 C's, things like calmness, curiosity, compassion, connectedness, confidence, courage, creativity, and clarity.
So the goal isn't to get rid of the frustrating parts, like the ego or that harsh inner critic.
No, not at all. That's often our first instinct, right? To fight them or banish them. But the IFS goal is integration. It's about understanding the positive intention behind even the most difficult parts.
How do you achieve that integration? How does the self emerge?
Well, the self can only really come forward and lead when the protectors, the parts running the show out of fear or past hurts, feel safe enough to relax and open up some space.
So you have to negotiate with them.
In a way, yes. A protector part often carries an extreme belief or burden, usually formed in response to some earlier experience, often childhood trauma or deep fear. The source material even suggests this integration serves a larger purpose, almost a spiritual one, a divine reconnection. The idea is that these parts actually long to connect back to the wisdom and compassion of the core self, just like we as whole people long for connection with others.
Can you give us an example of how that negotiation might work in practice?
Sure. Think about the anecdote of the tough guy protective part. This part might manifest inside someone as intense perfectionism or maybe constant, harsh self-criticism. It's always threatening you, right? You better behave, you better not screw up, or you'll fail and be rejected.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
So the self-expert, guided by IFS principles, doesn't try to yell back at the tough guy or suppress it. Instead, they approach it with curiosity, one of those core C's of the self. You turn towards the part internally and ask, genuinely, what are you so afraid will happen if you let me relax? What are you trying to protect me from? And often, the part will reveal its underlying fear, maybe fear of complete social rejection, utter failure, being overwhelmed. Once that part feels truly heard, understood, and importantly updated about the current reality, like, hey, we're actually safe now, we have resources, that old danger isn't present in the same way, it often feels immense relief.
And it can relax its extreme stance.
Exactly. It can shift from forcing behavior through fear and threats to supporting the self's goals in a more collaborative, helpful way. It becomes integrated, not eliminated.
That really shifts the whole paradigm from internal warfare to something more like internal diplomacy.
Beautifully put. Internal diplomacy. And finally, just to round out this picture of the multi-layered self, we have to acknowledge that our individual complexity sits atop a foundation of universal complexity. This brings us back briefly to Carl Jung and his concepts of the unconscious.
Right. Jung made that distinction, didn't he, between the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious?
He did. The personal unconscious is basically your own private history, repressed memories, unresolved emotional issues, what he called feeling-toned complexes. It's unique to you.
Okay.
But the collective unconscious, he proposed, is deeper. It's inherited. It's the repository of universal human experiences, instincts, and images shared by all people across cultures and time. And this is where the archetypes live.
Archetypes like the hero, the shadow.
Exactly. The shadow represents all the disowned, repressed parts of ourselves, the qualities we dislike and often project onto others. The hero is that universal pattern of facing trials, overcoming obstacles, achieving transformation. There are many others: the mother, the child, the wise old man.
Why is recognizing these archetypes important for the self-expert?
Because it reminds you that self-knowledge isn't just about excavating your own unique personal baggage. It's also about recognizing that your personal struggles, your patterns, often echo these universal, inherited human themes. By recognizing an archetype at play within you, like realizing you need to confront and integrate your shadow, rather than constantly battling people you see it in, you can gain immediate, powerful insights that go beyond just your individual story. It connects your journey to the larger human story.
Okay, so section 1 was really about the diagnostics, wasn't it? Understanding that you're predictably irrational in some ways, that you're biologically regulated by systems like the vagal nerve, and that you're internally complex, full of these different parts.
Right, laying the groundwork, understanding the machine you're working with.
Exactly. So now we pivot. We move to the practical application. How does the self-expert actually take this system and start to mold it? How do you foster growth?
Well, the absolute foundation of any kind of self-molding has to rely on reliable systems, not just on fleeting bursts of willpower or motivation. That's a huge theme in James Clear's work on habits. Mastery is built on systems.
Not just good intentions.
Not just good intentions. And probably the single most powerful tactical tool for establishing a new behavioral system is something called an implementation intention.
Ah, yes, that beautifully simple structure. I will behavior at time and location.
That's the one. It takes an abstract goal, like I want to read more books, and it forces you to ground it in concrete reality. I will read behavior for 15 minutes time on my commute location.
The power there is that it automates the cue, right?
Yeah.
You're not relying on remembering your vague goal or feeling motivated. You're linking the behavior to an existing time and place.
Precisely. You let the environment and the clock do the heavy lifting of reminding you. And the flip side of that first law of behavior change, make it obvious, is just as critical for the self-expert trying to break bad habits.
Which is?
Make the cue invisible. If you want to stop mindlessly scrolling social media on your phone first thing in the morning, the phone cannot be the first thing you see. It can't be on your nightstand.
You have to design your environment.
You design the environment so that the path of least resistance naturally leads you towards the positive action you want and away from the negative one you're trying to avoid. Make the good habits easy and the bad habits hard.
But, using implementation intentions, designing your environment, sometimes, especially at the beginning, it can feel kind of frustrating. You're doing the thing, but you're not seeing big dramatic results immediately. Why is that?
Yes. This is where we need to really grasp what James Clear calls the holy grail of habit change. It's understanding that true, lasting transformation isn't usually the result of one massive heroic action.
This is the small stuff.
It's the accumulation. It's a stack of maybe 1,000 tiny 1% improvements. And initially, each of those tiny changes feels almost meaningless. Why? Because, as Clear puts it, they get washed away by the weight of the existing system.
So reading 1 page a day for the first month, you might not feel any smarter or more well-read.
Exactly. The old system, not reading, still has more inertia. But the self-expert understands the power of compounding. You keep layering those 1% improvements consistently. You stick with the system.
Eventually.
Eventually, you hit a tipping point. It's like pushing a boulder. It takes huge effort at first, then suddenly it starts rolling. You reach a threshold where the cumulative weight of all those small wins starts working for you. Your identity begins to shift. And the behavior that used to feel difficult or require effort becomes the new default, supported by the momentum of the system you painstakingly built.
That's powerful. But that kind of systemic change, sticking with it through the initial friction, it probably requires more than just tactics, right? It needs a certain underlying belief structure.
Absolutely. It has to be supported by the right foundation, and that foundation is mindset, as identified in Carol Dweck's groundbreaking research.
Right. She contrasts the two core mindsets. First, the fixed mindset.
The fixed mindset is the belief that your core qualities like intelligence, talent, ability are innate and unchangeable. They're fixed traits. So if you have to put in a lot of effort to succeed at something, that's actually seen as evidence that you aren't naturally talented enough.
Which means this mindset leads people to fear failure intensely.
Hugely. Failure is seen as a judgment on your fundamental worth. So people with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges. They might give up easily when things get tough. They often ignore useful feedback, and they can feel threatened by the success of others. And crucially, they view mistakes not as opportunities to learn, but as proof of permanent inferiority.
And you mentioned earlier, this fixed mindset makes people really vulnerable to external threats, like stereotype threat.
Yes, critically so. If someone with a fixed mindset encounters a negative stereotype about a group they belong to, people like you aren't good at this kind of task, their performance is often immediately disrupted. Why? Because from their fixed perspective, that stereotype suggests a permanent, insurmountable deficiency. It feels like a verdict.
Ouch. Okay, so what's the alternative? The growth mindset.
The growth mindset is the belief that your basic abilities and intelligence are things you can cultivate through dedication and hard work. It doesn't mean everyone can become Einstein, but it means potential is something you develop. Success isn't about proving you're smart. It's about stretching yourself, learning, growing.
So mistakes are seen differently.
Completely differently. Mistakes are viewed as necessary parts of the learning process. They're correction points, providing valuable information about what strategies work and what don't. Effort isn't a sign of weakness. It's the mechanism by which you get smarter and better.
And this growth mindset, Dweck's research showed it actually protects people against things like stereotype threat.
It really does. It essentially takes the teeth out of the stereotype. Why? Because if you fundamentally believe that intelligence and ability are capacities you can work for and develop, then hearing a suggestion that you or your group might currently be behind doesn't feel like a fatal flaw.
It just means more work needed.
It just means you might need to increase your effort, try different strategies, seek help, persist longer. It doesn't imply a permanent, inescapable inferiority. That underlying attitude of resilience, that belief in your capacity to grow, it's absolutely non-negotiable for the self-expert navigating challenges. Hashtag 2.2 self-compassion and psychological fulfillment.
Okay, so we need systems, we need a growth mindset. But this journey of becoming a self-expert, it's rigorous, isn't it? It demands honesty, accountability.
Yeah.
And accountability without support can easily slide into just beating yourself up.
Oh, easily. Which brings us to the next absolutely crucial tool in the toolkit. Self-compassion. This has been extensively studied and championed by researchers like Kristen Neff and Brené Brown.
Why is it so important?
Because self-compassion provides the stable emotional foundation that prevents that fixed mindset from taking over when inevitably you encounter setbacks, make mistakes, or fall short of your goals. It's what allows you to pick yourself up and keep going with that growth orientation.
So what is self-compassion exactly? Is it just being nice to yourself?
It's more structured than that. Neff defines it as having 3 core interactive elements, and all 3 need to be present for it to be genuine self-compassion. The first is mindfulness.
Mindfulness, like being present.
Yes. Specifically, it means acknowledging your pain, your disappointment, your feelings of inadequacy in a balanced way. You don't suppress or ignore the negative feelings, but you also don't get swept away by them or over-identify with them. You see the pain clearly, observe it without judgment, but you don't become the pain itself.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second element?
The second is common humanity. This is the powerful antidote to the feeling of isolation that so often accompanies failure or suffering. It's the conscious recognition that suffering, imperfection, and feelings of inadequacy, that sense of being fundamentally flawed, sometimes are not your unique burden. They are part of the shared, universal human experience.
So realizing I'm not the only one who feels this way. This is part of being human.
Exactly. You're not uniquely terrible or broken. You are simply human, navigating the difficulties of life like everyone else. It connects you rather than isolates you.
And the third element?
The third is self-kindness. This is about actively responding to yourself in moments of suffering with the same warmth, care, and understanding that you would naturally offer to a beloved friend who is going through the same thing. It means consciously choosing to replace that harsh, punitive inner critic with a supportive, encouraging, warm inner voice.
So it's an active choice.
Very much so. It's treating yourself with gentleness when you're hurting.
Now, we also need to get a bit nuanced about self-compassion, don't we? Because it isn't just about passively soothing yourself after something bad happens. The sources talk about two necessary forms, fierce and tender.
Yes, this is a really important distinction Neff makes. Tender self-compassion is largely what we've just described. It's about being with ourselves in a comforting way, soothing our emotional wounds after we've maybe been mistreated or failed at something, holding our pain with warmth, acceptance, giving ourselves the validation and consideration we need to recover and heal. It's primarily about acceptance and recovery.
Okay. And fierce self-compassion.
Fierce self-compassion is about acting in the world to protect and provide for ourselves. It's more proactive. It involves things like setting firm boundaries, saying no, standing up for ourselves, taking action to change harmful situations, or motivating ourselves to make changes that support our well-being and fulfillment. It's the self-expert deciding, because I value myself and my well-being, I will take this difficult but necessary step. I will carve out time for my own fulfillment. I will remove myself from this toxic environment.
So it requires courage, maybe even some metabolic output, some effort. It's not passive at all.
Yeah, not at all. It's self-care that demands action and strength. We need both tender and fierce compassion to be whole and resilient.
And the self-expert learns to integrate these internal voices, right? Like the inner critic and the compassion itself.
Exactly. Take the example of the inner critic screaming internally, maybe after you make a mistake. You idiot, you fool, you completely failed that task. The old reaction might be to believe it or fight it. But the integrated, compassionate self, drawing on both tenderness and fierceness, doesn't try to eliminate the critic. Instead, it might respond internally with something like boundary and truth. Whoa, Tiger, I hear how upset you are, and I know you're probably trying to keep me safe from future failure. But calling me names isn't helpful. Failure is information. Let's look at what we can learn here so we can do better next time.
So they typically share the same ultimate goal improvement, safety, but the methodology shifts radically from fear and attack to support and learning.
Perfectly said. The goal is shared. The method becomes compassionate and constructive.
And this intentional focus on nurturing the self, fostering your natural inclinations, taking action for fulfillment, it connects directly to the legacy of the human potential movement, doesn't it? Particularly thinkers like Abraham Maslow.
It absolutely does. Maslow talked about self-actualization not as a destination you arrive at, but as this ongoing dynamic process. It's about actively fostering your unique talents, your genuine inclinations, your potential, without unnecessary hindrance from internal fears or external pressures.
So the self-expert understands that the ultimate purpose isn't just achieving stability or avoiding pain, it's growth.
It's growth, fulfillment, becoming more fully yourself. Maslow argued that if you ignore those deep-seated needs we all have for meaning, for mastery, for creativity, for contribution, if you consistently fail to cultivate your authentic self and potential, you will experience a kind of psychological stagnation, a deep sense of unease or emptiness that no amount of external success or material comfort can truly fill.
So self-actualization, in this sense, is the ultimate act of self-expertise, taking deliberate action to honor and express your own unique potential.
That's it, exactly. It's the highest application in all these tools we're discussing.
Okay, our journey started inside, understanding the inner system, the mind, the biology. Then we talked about the tools for self-molding habits, mindset, self-compassion. But of course, the self doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it?
Not at all. We exist in relationship with others and within the larger context of society. So our self-expertise has to be applicable out there in the real world.
Right. Needs to translate into how we navigate relationships, how we handle conflict, how we find our agency within the structures around us. #TAG 3.1 relationship health and conflict resolution.
Definitely. And when it comes to applying self-expertise to perhaps the most crucial area, intimate partnerships, a science of adult attachment, pioneered by researchers like Bowlby and Ainsworth, and popularized by people like Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, gives us a remarkably simple yet powerful first diagnostic question.
A question to ask about a potential partner.
Yes. A question that cuts through a lot of the surface stuff like charm or initial excitement. The crucial first question is, does this person consistently, through their actions, genuinely seek and value intimacy and closeness?
That's the filter.
That's the primary filter. Because how they answer that question through their behavior tells you a huge amount about their attachment style.
Yeah.
Their internal working model for connection. If the answer, based on their actions over time, is consistently, no, maybe they keep you at arm's length. Avoid deep sharing, prioritize independence above all else, despite maybe saying they want closeness.
Then you're likely dealing with someone with an avoidant attachment style.
Very likely. If the answer is genuinely yes, they seek closeness, they value the bond, they're comfortable with interdependence, then they are likely either secure or potentially anxious in their attachment style. This first question helps you start to understand their operating manual for relationships.
Okay. And here's where things get tricky, isn't it? The sources talk about this great, often miserable paradox in relationship dynamics that the self-expert really needs to recognize.
Ah, yes. The pattern where people with an anxious attachment style, the ones who deeply crave stable, close, consistent intimacy and reassurance, very often, almost tragically, end up repeatedly dating avoidance.
Why? It seems completely counterintuitive. Why would someone who craves closeness be drawn to someone who pushes it away?
It's a complex dynamic, but a core reason is that the avoidant partner's behavior, their distance, their emotional unavailability, the inconsistency, the inherent uncertainty they create, actually activates the anxious person's attachment system intensely.
It activates them.
Yes. It triggers that familiar, often overwhelming feeling of needing to pursue, to win reassurance, to close the distance. This intense activation, this preoccupation with the relationship status, can sometimes mirror early life experiences where love or security felt conditional or uncertain.
So the roller coaster of uncertainty and the intense feelings it generates, it gets mistaken for deep love or importance.
It can, yes. The anxiety and the pursuit feel like high stakes, like intense engagement, even if the underlying dynamic is actually causing a lot of pain and insecurity. The uncertainty fuels preoccupation, which the anxious system misinterprets as profound connection or chemistry.
Okay, so if you find yourself in that kind of dynamic, the anxious person constantly activated by the avoidant partner's distancing or deactivating strategies, how do you get out? It sounds incredibly difficult.
It is incredibly difficult because you're fighting against powerful attachment drives. To exit such a dysfunctional cycle, the sources suggest that the anxious individual often has to unconsciously, or sometimes consciously, engage in their own set of painful but necessary deactivating strategies. It's like the system's way of building an escape ramp.
What do those deactivating strategies look like for the anxious person trying to leave? Are they deliberate decisions?
Often they start unconsciously, almost automatically, as the pain becomes too much. The person might start to emotionally detach, almost numb themselves. They might begin to focus much more intensely on the partner's flaws, things they previously overlooked.
Kind of building a case against them in their own mind.
Exactly. They might stop concentrating on positive shared memories and instead dwell on the negative interactions. They might start fantasizing about being single or with someone else. It's like they're mentally building an escape hatch, creating emotional distance to make the eventual break possible. It's an emotionally taxing process, for sure, but it's often the only way the attachment system allows itself to let go of a bond that is ultimately detrimental to well-being.
Wow. That requires a lot of self-awareness to even notice happening.
It does. Now, moving from choosing partners and ending relationships to managing conflict within an ongoing relationship, Dr. John Gottman's extensive research out of his Love Lab provides this crucial anatomy of relationship dissolution. He identified what he calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for marriage.
These are the communication patterns that strongly predict divorce or relationship breakdown.
That's right. They are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling.
Okay, let's break those down briefly. Criticism isn't just complaining, is it?
No. Criticism is different from a specific complaint. A complaint focuses on a specific behavior. I'm upset you didn't take out the trash. Criticism attacks the partner's character. You're so lazy, you never help out. It's global and blaming.
And defensiveness.
Defensiveness is essentially warding off a perceived attack by refusing to take responsibility, making excuses, cross-complaining, or playing the innocent victim. It's not my fault, you're the one who... It escalates conflict because no one feels heard.
Stonewalling.
Stonewalling is basically emotional and physiological shutdown. One partner withdraws from the interaction, stops responding, maybe looks away, acts busy. It often happens when someone feels physiologically overwhelmed or flooded.
And the fourth one, contempt. Gottman says this is the most lethal.
By far, contempt is the psychological poison in a relationship. It involves acting superior to your partner, conveying disgust. It manifests as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, hostile humor, mocking the partner.
Why is it so destructive?
Because it signals utter disregard and disrespect for the partner's value as a person. It says, you are beneath me. Gottman found it's the single best predictor of relationship failure. The self-expert must be vigilant against all four, but especially contempt, in their own behavior and recognize it in others.
So when conflict does arise and maybe things start escalating towards these patterns, what's the primary responsibility of the self-expert?
Self-regulation. Recognizing when you or your partner are starting to experience what Gottman calls flooding.
Flooding. That physiological overwhelm.
Exactly. Your heart rate surges, often above 100 BPM. Adrenaline and cortisol spike. Your blood flow shifts away from your rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, towards your limbs. Your brain's complex problem-solving and empathy functions literally shut down. You are physiologically prepared for battle or escape, not for constructive conversation or negotiation.
So trying to resolve conflict when flooded is basically impossible.
Utterly pointless and usually damaging. This is where the skill of physiological self-soothing becomes paramount. And Gottman gives a very clear, non-negotiable first step.
Which is?
Stop the discussion. Immediately. Agree beforehand that either partner can call a timeout, and then take a minimum 20-minute physiological break, separate rooms if necessary.
20 minutes. Why so specific?
Because research shows it takes at least that long, sometimes longer, for the autonomic nervous system to calm down, for heart rate and stress hormones to return to baseline, and for blood flow to return to the prefrontal cortex, allowing rational thought and empathy to come back online.
Okay, so take a break. But what you do during that break is critical, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. The sources stress this point heavily. During that cool-down period, you must avoid mentally rehearsing your grievances.
Meaning, don't sit there stewing and thinking about how right you are and how wrong they are.
Precisely. Do not entertain thoughts of righteous indignation. I was completely justified and they're being totally unreasonable. Or thoughts of innocent victimhood. Look how unfairly I'm being treated. I didn't deserve this.
Why is avoiding those thoughts so important?
Because those kinds of thoughts will just keep your sympathetic nervous system activated. They'll keep the adrenaline pumping, keep you feeling angry or hurt, and completely negate the calming purpose of the break. You'll come back just as flooded or even more entrenched.
So what should you do during the break?
You need to do something genuinely distracting and soothing. Read a magazine, listen to calming music, do some gentle stretching, focus on your breathing, maybe go for a short walk, not thinking about the argument. Anything that takes your mind completely off the conflict and allows your body to physiologically reset.
And only return to the conversation when you feel genuinely calm and capable of listening and collaborating again.
That's the rule. That is applied self-expertise in managing conflict in real time. It takes discipline, but it can save relationships. Hashtag 3.2, the self versus civilization and chaos.
Okay, we've looked inward, we've looked at relationships. Now let's zoom out even further to the ultimate existential challenge. The individual self navigating the demands of society, of civilization itself, which often feels inherently restrictive, doesn't it? Freud talked a lot about this eternal, almost irreconcilable conflict.
He really did. Freud saw this ceaseless tension between two powerful forces. On one side, you have the individual's inherent natural urges, particularly for aggressive expression and for complete sexual freedom, that part of us that remains fundamentally untamed by social training.
Our primal nature, in a way.
Yes. And on the other side, you have the relentless demands of civilization, embodied in the cultural superego. Society requires us, for the sake of collective safety and order, to suppress or redirect those primal urges. We have to inhibit our aggression, restrict our sexuality, conform to rules and norms.
But Freud argued that the cost of this compliance, this suppression, is significant, right? It leads to unhappiness, neurosis, because our full instinctual nature is constantly being thwarted.
Exactly. He saw a fundamental antagonism there. He believed that finding a truly happy accommodation between the individual's drive for freedom and civilization's need for control was incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible. The best we can hope for, he suggested, is a kind of ongoing, necessary, and often uncomfortable negotiation, a compromise.
So the self-expert recognizes that this tension between your unique individual needs and the demands of the collective, the mass claims of civilization, it's perpetual. It's not a problem you solve once and for all, like by moving to the wilderness or achieving perfect social conformity. It's a lifelong balancing act.
A constant negotiation, absolutely.
And this inherent conflict with the external structures of civilization is then compounded by the nature of our internal world itself. According to the work of Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist famous for his research on flow.
Yes, Csikszentmihalyi's research, through thousands of interviews and experience sampling studies, revealed something quite profound and maybe a little unsettling about the default setting of the human mind.
Which is?
That when the mind is not actively engaged by some kind of structured activity, when it's just left to its own devices, allowed to wander freely, what we might call downtime, its normal default state, tends towards chaos.
Chaos. What does that look like internally?
It often manifests as psychic entropy, a sense of disorder. Worry, anxiety, rumination, intrusive negative thoughts, boredom, a lack of clear motivation or focus. His data suggested that, generally speaking, people report being least happy and least satisfied when their mind is unstructured and just kind of idling, often thinking about themselves and their problems.
That's counterintuitive, isn't it? We often crave unstructured downtime.
We do, but often find it less fulfilling than we expect unless we fill it with something engaging. Now, historically, humanity developed powerful cultural protective devices to help structure consciousness and combat this internal chaos, things like religion, philosophy, rituals, structured social roles.
These provided meaning, order, goal.
Exactly. They gave people a framework to organize their experience and attention. But Csikszentmihalyi argued that in the modern world, the effectiveness of many of these traditional shields is weakening. They only protect us from chaos for a while, or for some people.
So if the mind defaults to chaos and traditional structures are less reliable, what's the implication for finding happiness or improving quality of life?
The implication is stark. Simply trying to maximize the biologically programmed pleasures, chasing more wealth, more power, higher status, more intense sensory experiences like sex, will not, on its own, sustainably improve the quality of your inner experience.
Why not? Those things feel good.
They provide temporary enjoyment, yes. Spikes of pleasure, but they don't fundamentally address the underlying issue of internal chaos or psychic entropy. They don't provide enduring structure or meaning to consciousness itself. Once the thrill fades, the default state of disorder can easily return.
Therefore, the self-expert realizes they must take more direct control over their own experience. They can't just rely on external rewards or dissolving structures.
Precisely. Direct control over the quality of inner experience is key. And according to Csikszentmihalyi, this control is primarily achieved through engaging in consciously chosen, differentiated, and integrated goals.
Okay, unpack that a little. Consciously chosen.
Meaning goals that align with your authentic values and interests, not just goals imposed by society or biology. Differentiated means they're complex enough, challenging enough, requiring skill and concentration to pursue. Integrated means they fit together into a larger sense of purpose or life project.
So things that require focus, skill, and feel meaningful to you, like playing music, mastering a craft, engaging in challenging work, deep learning, flow activities.
Exactly. These kinds of self-directed, goal-oriented activities are what bring order to consciousness. They structure attention, provide clear feedback, banish psychic entropy, and generate that sense of deep engagement and satisfaction we call flow. We must actively construct these meaningful projects that bring internal order and purpose to counteract the mind's natural tendency towards chaos.
And what's the ultimate end point, the highest expression, perhaps, of this kind of self-directed purpose? Ernest Becker, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Denial of Death, talks about something he called cosmic heroism.
Ah, Becker. Yes. His work is incredibly profound. Becker observed that every human being has an innate need to feel heroic, to feel that their life has significance, value, meaning in the grand scheme of things. We need to feel we matter.
But most people, he argued, try to achieve this sense of heroism within the confines of culture, right?
Yes. Most people live under the umbrella of what he called cultural heroism. They try to earn their sense of value and significance by successfully performing the heroic roles laid out by their particular society. Being the perfect employee, the devoted parent, the successful entrepreneur, the respected community member, whatever the cultural script dictates as good or valuable.
But Becker saw this as often being a kind of character lie, didn't he? Seeking validation purely from external sources, conforming to roles that might not be truly authentic.
He did. He saw it as necessary for functioning in society, but ultimately limited and fragile because it depends on the approval of others and the stability of cultural values, which can change. Cosmic heroism, for Becker, represents the breakthrough beyond merely cultural validation. It's the highest, most authentic act of self-expertise.
What does it involve?
It involves daring to destroy that limiting cultural character lie, the way society tries to narrowly define your worth or potential. It requires you to consciously link your authentic inner self, your deepest feelings, your unique talents, your personal truths, cultivated through self-knowledge and self-molding, directly to what Becker metaphorically called the very ground of creation.
So connecting your personal meaning to something bigger than just societal approval.
Exactly. It's about creating and affirming your ultimate existential value in a way that feels true and resonant at the deepest level, independent of whether the mass society happens to approve or understand at that particular moment. It means your sense of worth, your life's meaning, is ultimately grounded in your internal project, your integrity, your connection to life itself, not just in your social status or conformity.
That commitment to internal truth, to defining your own ultimate meaning, that feels like the final courageous act of the truly self-directed expert.
Becker certainly thought so. It's the ultimate expression of taking ownership of your life's meaning. Hashtags outro.
Wow, we have really covered some ground today, haven't we, in this sort of commencement deep dive. We've truly traveled the full spectrum. We started down at the micro level, mapping the smallest systems of our nervous system, that crucial regulating vagal brake. And we ended up contemplating the largest possible existential ambition, the individual's quest for what Becker called cosmic heroism. Along the way, we started by really acknowledging those hidden rules that govern so much of our experience, how cognitive dissonance subtly locks us into justifying our choices,
Right.
how our past conditioning and our vagal state influence our vulnerability and openness, and that crucial insight that our irrationality isn't random, it's systematically predictable.
And then we gathered the essential tools for actually molding that system, didn't we? The practical power of implementation, intentions to build self-sustaining habits, the incredible defensive and empowering strength that comes from cultivating a growth mindset.
And the necessity of active, integrative leadership from within through self-compassion learning to be both fierce and tender with ourselves. We now understand, hopefully, the vital importance of seeking genuine intimacy in relationships based on attachment science and the absolute physiological need to self-soothe effectively during conflict.
The outcome, really, of this entire deep dive, this whole season perhaps, isn't a degree certificate you hang on the wall. It's something much more profound. It's the realization, the embodied understanding that the success of your own internal system, your well-being, your growth, your fulfillment, depends entirely on you, the self-expert, being perpetually engaged.
Engaged in understanding of working with the system.
Exactly. You now have the knowledge, the frameworks, the tools to take ownership of your cognitive traps, to have that internal diplomacy with your inner parts, and to intentionally, consciously chart your own course through the inherent chaos of life and mind.
So what does this all mean? I guess the end result of the deep dive is you. You, the listener, fully informed, capable of self-correction, and truly equipped to lead your own life.
And that brings us appropriately to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with, one that maybe challenges the very foundation of self-knowledge we've been building.
Okay.
We know that the ability to remember your past is absolutely crucial for your sense of self, for continuity, for learning. Yet a growing body of neurological studies suggests that memory is not like a permanent, accurate recording device, passively storing objective facts.
It's not like a video camera in the head.
Not at all. Instead, some compelling research, like work building on Peter Levine's or Pierre Glore's findings on arousal and memory, suggests that the feeling of realness or the vividness of an image or event recalled from your past isn't necessarily tied to its objective accuracy. Rather, it seems to be powerfully reinforced by the intensity of the physiological arousal, the emotional charge that was associated with that experience at the time it was encoded.
Whoa. So the memories that feel most true or stand out the most might be the ones that were linked to the strongest emotions. Fear, joy, shame, excitement, not necessarily the most factually accurate ones.
That's the implication. Your personal history, the story you tell yourself about your past, appears to be an actively managed, subjective, emotionally reinforced narrative, not a literal movie that you just passively play back.
Okay.
So the final question for you, the self-expert, is this. If your past is not a fixed objective record, but rather a subjective narrative, powerfully shaped by past emotional intensity, and one that neuroscience suggests you might have the power to actively renegotiate, reframe, and integrate, what does that truly mean for you as you set out to define your true self today and chart a definitive course for your future?
You're not just recalling your past to inform your future. You might actually be actively defining your past in ways that support the future you want to build.
The challenge and the power inherent in that realization, that's yours alone to explore.
Congratulations, expert. Now go build. We'll see you on the next deep dive.